Hello, BookTube. Welcome to the first live of Dr. November. I'm Mark from Book Time with Elvis, and we're joined by I was trying to think of a funny introduction. I'll do it. By the wonderful Steve Donahue from, obviously, Steve Donahue's channel, and Greg from Another Bibliophile Reads. Hello, gentlemen, and Steve.
Hello there.
Hello.
How are we doing?
Trouble and just said I'm joined by a reputable guest and a disreputable guest. People would have known instantly what you were talking about.
Yeah, it's very true, probably.
And again, some people may switch which one's reputable, which one's disreputable.
I really doubt it. Wasn't it Mark left a comment? Mark left a comment just recently saying, "Thank you very much, gentlemen," and Steve.
Yes. It's all good humor, isn't it? It's all taken in good humor. Like, so Dr. November, espionage fiction, espionage non-fiction, everything from 1917 pretty much up to 1991 and the dissolution of the Soviet Union, which of course we're all too young to remember. Well, no, we do remember, probably. Even at 28, would you remember? No, you wouldn't, but And it's a shame one of our co-hosts was there and probably the cause of it, and he's not here today. So,
And we stretch the umbrella of Dr. November to include agent thrillers, people who aren't necessarily doing actual espionage.
Yeah, I think honestly anything kind of Cold War related, but if we just push the boundaries of the Cold War starting in 1917, because I think that is important really there, because there's a lot of good stuff that comes out of that. I mean, some of the nonfiction I've picked up and wanted to read, which one of them I read a couple of years ago. You've probably read it. Is, I don't know if you know the historian Giles Milton. He does like a lot of nice kind of narrative history, and he wrote one called Russian Roulette, which looked at like kind of the first spies. You're like the first Cold War spies really, who were there during the early days of the Russian Revolution. And I also wanted to read things like John Reed's 10 Days That Shook the World, just because I think it sets the scene as to what's to come really later on, that kind of thing. So,
but we're leaving out espionage from earlier eras, right? So I think written about totally honest espionage. That's all out.
No, I think in this case, maybe yes, but maybe if we carry on next year, we can expand it, because it would be kind of nice to put in something like The Great Game as well. And there were obviously wonderful nonfiction for that as well, with Peter Hopkirk and that kind of thing. So I think, we can widen it next time around, but I was only thinking more at the time. I was thinking only of John le Carré and Ian Fleming, really. An excuse to read them.
But you of all people left out the Raj.
I know, and it's a shame, because I don't know how into podcasts you two are, but there's a wonderful fairly new one. I think it's only in its first, or might just be starting its second year, called Empire, and it's co-hosted by the author William Dalrymple, and literally they've just ended the Russian Revolution, so they've been doing the relationship between Britain and Russia. It was fascinating, really, really interesting. So, and they had on Simon Sebag Montefiore, they had on Sir Anthony Beevor and people to talk about this kind of thing, and it was great, really great series. So,
and Mark,
anyway,
I was about to say, I just finished Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy.
Wonderful.
And just out of validation, one of the characters mentioned in that book that the Cold War began in 1917 with the Russian Revolution. Wonderful. So therefore, our choice is completely validated by John le Carré.
You need to, Greg, and it's on YouTube. I think if you haven't seen it, you need to watch the late 78, 79 miniseries from the BBC or ITV, I don't remember, with Sir Alec Guinness as George Smiley. Brilliant, really good.
Maybe, I mean, I'm not a fan of Hollywood movies at all. I'm just not a fan.
It's different. It's very low budget.
George Smiley, Alec Guinness as George Smiley. It's cinema immortality.
Well, it's interesting. I don't know if you you probably did read it, Steve. It's not a have you read it question, but it's just it fits in with what I was going to ask. Is Le Carré's letters?
Oh yes,
and
I'm in my second reread right now.
I've started it, but I just love. He has an extract on the back. Sorry, it's blinding light, where he's writing to Alec Guinness about trying to convince him to take the role of George Smiley. And it's just very interesting that he mentions one of the alternatives. And I don't know if he's familiar to American audiences, but he mentions Arthur Lowe, who was, if you ever saw the series Dad's Army, was the short, chubby captain of the Home Guard. And the funny thing is, I think that actually could have worked, maybe, but just because Alec Guinness is just so brilliant at it. So
yeah, in a later letter, Le Carré writes to a friend about the trouble with a sequel.
Yeah,
because Guinness wanted it. Guinness wanted to do. He viewed that as a major thing to do because he considered himself a second-rate actor in search of a first-rate role. And how does that feel to us now? To look at that and think about that. It caused nothing but headache for Le Carré and his agent, because they wanted a movie. They wanted a big screen movie, not a TV show.
Are you going on, Greg, to read The Honorable Schoolboy? Or
well, I have them all on my Kindle. I have most of Le Carré's books on my Kindle just because they show up for $1.99, $2.99 with relatively frequency, and I just buy them for someday. So
no, they're well worth it. But it's interesting with The Honorable Schoolboy because I really can't remember if it was the BBC or ITV who filmed Tinker Tailor, but they then just went ahead and did Smiley's People a couple of years later, but they skipped the middle one, I guess, because it was just too difficult to do. And so that might have been part of the reason with this sequel is they wanted to do it, but they knew they couldn't do, because in the TV series of Tinker Tailor, they when he meets up with who is it? When Ricky Tarr meets Irena and all this, I think in the book is Hong Kong. Is it? It might be. I don't know.
Well, the thing is, in the book, you don't get it's all investigation. It's not the actual seeing them in there. So they're just talking about their meetups, which is a very different way to do a book.
I think it's a different place, and certainly The Honorable Schoolboy is all set in Hong Kong during the Vietnam War. And I guess they just wouldn't have had the budget to do that or whatever, so they didn't bother. So they just skipped it and filmed the third volume. But it's very different, The Honorable Schoolboy. But I really liked it. So,
well, see, the thing is, after I've read this book one time, say, if I want to understand this book, I have to reread it. It's just nothing you can pick up on the first round because there's so much going on that is not told to the reader what's going on, and you just have to figure out what yourself. So before I go on to The Honorable Schoolboy, I'm probably going to pick up an audio version of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy so I can just get it back down and then go on to The Honorable Schoolboy and then probably listen to the audiobook after that. And just because like when we've done like The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, this will be my fourth time reading it, something like that. So I think I'm pretty confident that I can get that book and really understand all the nuances. Like it's a George Smiley book, without spoiler, but you have to know what George Smiley's doing to see him on every page.
Yeah, I mean that is the thing, isn't it? I mean, I think he appears all of half a page or a page in the whole book, but it's a George Smiley novel because he's there.
Because George Smiley's on every page of that book. He's just not.
And it's a perfect example of what Greg's talking about, where you go into it and the book ensnares you, the action ensnares you, the not quite knowing where you are or what's happening ensnares you, but it's only when you reread it, knowing what you know, that you see that it's meant to be read that way. Kind of amazing. Kind of amazing. You think that I'm curious to know, if I may, do either one of you remember the very first awareness that you had of the existence of the thing called espionage? Do you remember the first awareness that you had that America had spies, that Russia had spies? Did it come through popular entertainment or through the news?
We had spies too, Phil B. Burgess, McLean, they were good ones, you know.
Honestly, I think the first awareness was probably in the Roger Moore James Bond movies.
Really? So in fiction rather than reality?
Right. I mean, you don't talk about spies in reality.
Wow.
Not back then.
No, I suppose because it was an all too real reality back then, maybe. It's an excellent question, Steve, because I'm racking my brains. I would have said Le Carré purely because my father was such a fan, and I certainly watched the Tinker Tailor series from a young age. But it may well also have been James Bond. But for me, the first Bond I watched in the cinema was actually Timothy Dalton, who always gets a bad rap, but I quite like him. So, you know, yeah, I don't know. What about you?
What about Russia and the Iron Curtain? What about the Cold War itself? Surely the Cold War made an impression on you before the movies. No? Did you do bomb drills? Either one of you?
No, I'm a little bit young. I think for me, I was born in 1980, so I was 9. I was 9 when the wall came down, but I do remember it. I think that probably, if I'm really honest, I think the Berlin Wall coming down was probably when I became aware of the significance of the Cold War. I knew maybe I knew things because I knew these countries existed from school, and that perhaps we couldn't visit them and this kind of stuff, and that Russia was supposed to be scary and all this kind of thing. But it was that, and the thing that sticks in my mind most of all, though, was actually the killing of Nicolae Ceausescu and his wife, Elena, was it? And I was very upset because they killed a woman, you know, because I'm only a 9-year-old child and I couldn't understand why they had shot a woman. Of course, as I got older and I learned more about it, I believed it was probably too good for her anyway, to be honest, you know. But yeah, I think, I remember those days.
As you got older, you became more and more okay with the idea of women being killed.
Also, now that Steve is like, because I was growing up, Ronald Reagan was president. And he's all about fighting Russia and how bad Russia was. And I remember it was a re-election campaign for Reagan, where it was there's a bear in the woods. Steve, and you know, what are you going to do about this bear? And then just picture of Ronald Reagan staring down the bear, saying the bear like turns or something like that. It's just like, now, Mark, that's way before your time, but Steve, you might remember that one.
So you remember, okay, so neither one of you has any personal memory of something called the Cuban Missile Crisis.
No.
Oh, wow. So when Mark says, yes, I'd heard vaguely that Russia was kind of scary, that's about as far as it goes. Wow. Oh, my.
Yeah.
No, that's covered though. That's probably better for you, for your mental health.
Well, I remember like people would be talking about it when I was a kid, and I remember seeing like the old newsreels because I grew up in Bermuda, so it always felt like a bit isolated from the world anyway. And then we had at the time only one television channel, and it only broadcast between certain times of the day. And they used to have, it was always around the time I came home from school, they used to have this thing, which I guess came from American television, because you had this like big American voice announcement would be like, and now a date in history. And it would always show these things. And then it would show, like, I guess, on today in 20 years ago was the Cuban Missile Crisis, or this kind of stuff. And I remember seeing the old, newsreels about the duck and cover in school classrooms and things like that. But no, not as an actual policy at the time I was alive. No.
Well, Reagan's advisors told they went to the press. I was writing editorials at the time and just was dumbfounded, because he went to his advisors and said, look, if we push them, their whole economy will collapse. If we push them, they can't sustain it. And his younger advisor said, "You're nuts. This is the Soviet Union we're talking about. They have enslaved countries. Of course, if we push them, we risk World War III. We risk the end of the world." Those comments of his snuck out to the press, and it turns out, as galling as it is, he was right.
He's an interesting character. He's an interesting character, Reagan.
He's right. If you push, if you maintain a hard line, they do implode. Their economy did implode.
It's one of my favorite things is to watch his jokes. I didn't realize how funny he was, Reagan, actually. Like some of the jokes he says about the Soviet Union and things. I mean, you can watch reels of them on YouTube, but you know, one of my favorites, he said, you know, what was it? He said, oh yeah, this Russian met an American and they were talking, and the American said, you know, I'm really lucky. I live in a democracy, and you know, I can walk into Washington, I can walk into the White House, and I can walk into the president's office and say, Mr. President, Mr. Reagan, you're doing a terrible job. And the Russian says, I can do that too. I could walk into the Kremlin, I could walk into Gorbachev's office and say, Mr. President, Reagan's doing a terrible job. You know, so it's like
you're saying Ronald Reagan's rubber dinner circuit jokes are on YouTube?
Yeah, they're so funny, some of them, you know, they're really good. Like he does one about which I've heard here, because of course, remember, I'm living in a former socialist and communist country, but
former heavy air quotes.
over the but he does one where it's like this family wants to buy a car or something, and they call up the Lada factory and say, yes, I want a car, and they say, yes, you'll have the car in 10 years. And the man says, is that morning or afternoon? He's like, why do you care? It's like 10 years from now. And the guy says, yeah, I know, but the plumber's coming in the afternoon. So it's like, you know, these kind of communist jokes which resonate here.
This warm-up material, but you're telling me this is on YouTube?
This is all on YouTube. Everything's on YouTube. Everything. So anyway, let's just jump through some of the comments, because I've neglected them a little bit. So Michael's here. Hello to you. Alexis is here. Then we have a few people saying hello to each other. Christina, good morning to you there in Los Angeles. Sean D. Standfast is here. Hey, Sean.
Hey, Sean.
007 himself has popped in briefly to say hello. Aaron's here. Let's see, what does Bill say? Hi, you don't wait until I get back. No, sorry, we didn't. But we will. Well, hopefully you haven't missed much. Tim says Sam Neill was in a miniseries called Riley, Ace of Spies, about Sidney Riley, British affiliated spy who was heavily involved in Russian Revolution. Yes, and he is the object or subject of the book Russian Roulette by Giles Milton. I mentioned at the beginning there. Gareth here. Hello. Winterland is here. Aaron, as usual, is always here to back me up with the facts. Tinker Tailor said I was BBC. Good. Ricky Tarsine's in the book were Hong Kong, and that's right, set in Portugal again, because I think of probably logistics. Yanni is here. Sorry, there's quite a few to go through. We left it going. Mayhem. Oh, that's not working, is it? Oh, I do. Well, that's weird. I don't know if we're still here. Did you drop off for a second, or was that me?
I think you were a little bit frozen for a moment.
Ah, okay. Tim was in Moscow when the US invaded Grenada. What a group of youngsters. John le Carré lived just. Yes, I remember you saying that, Yanni. That's cool. Cuban Missile Crisis, learning about it in history. Always good to make you feel young when people say that, isn't it? In the UK, we didn't cover the Cuban Missile Crisis at school. Definitely something you would know if you investigated yourself over here.
Didn't cover it in school.
No.
Well, I think he's in the UK, and it's like Cuban Missile Crisis, not what we have to worry about.
Well, I think people worry that
uninhabitable for 150,000 years.
Yeah,
on a Tuesday. the surface of the world would have been uninhabitable for 150,000 years.
Well, people worried about it.
We're in the UK.
People worried about it at the time for sure, because both my parents remember it and remember feeling very, very concerned over it. So I think it's just one of those things that once it, finished, maybe it left the consciousness a little bit. I don't know. But
it did. I mean, I have not worried about nuclear war. I mean, the way I did when I was in like early high school, like you're always worried, oh, the bomb is going to drop and everything's going to be terrible. But you don't really worry about that too much anymore, the way we used to.
A bit more.
Ironically, you should worry about it more.
Now, the thing is, it's getting to the point. It's like, well, maybe it's time to start thinking about, old Vlad getting upset about his economy being destroyed for a second time and saying, what the hell? Everyone's going to go out with me.
It won't be. Putin's advisors would kill him before that happened. It'll be India and Pakistan, if it's anybody. And that's why I'm amazed that hasn't happened in 50 years. Amazed that hasn't happened. But we're not even talking. I mean, in the good old days of the Cold War, it was states that you had to think about. But that's not true now. For all I know, you can make a working atomic bomb with a 3D printer. Now it's rogue agents. Now it's rogue agents that you need to worry about, who can just go on the gray market and get one of these things. And you detonate a low-grade nuclear weapon in a major seaport of either Russia or the United States, and you guarantee a full-scale retaliation from sea and land and sky, and then that's it. Those things are... Anyway, I'm talking myself into it. I do have...
The thing is, though, how would they know who to retaliate against?
That's the whole thing. They wouldn't know and wouldn't care.
You just retaliate against everyone.
These things are on such a hair trigger. It's amazing it hasn't happened yet. But
let's just be thankful for that.
I have another nosy question for the two of you, if you're willing.
Sure.
Why is it that you think? Well, it's actually not a nosy question. It's a literary question. Why is it that you think that spy fiction, espionage fiction, has such appeal? I mean, it's still being written. The Soviet Union fell a long time ago. It was being written long before the Russian Revolution. Why does it have such appeal, do you think? Or rather, I could do the nosy part and ask, why does it have an appeal for you?
Well, I think the stories are basic. It's like a murder mystery. Most people do not know people get murdered a lot and have to investigate who the killer is. You're never in a B&B where one of the guests gets murdered and go, who killed that guest and why? But mysteries like that are extremely popular. I mean, I don't know of a B&B mystery series, but someone could do it.
Oh my God, there are 500 of them.
There are?
Yeah, they are the staple of cozy mysteries.
Okay, see, but why are they popular? I mean, you don't go to a B&B and see people murdered, but you read it. People would want to read about it.
So does the type of you like the type of spy fiction where you can't ever really be sure who's the spy?
I like the darker, ambiguous ones, like where you're not really sure who the good guy is and the bad guy is. It's all sort of muddled up, and each side is doing nasty things and questionable things. And
boy, if you like that, you must be loving rereading Le Carré. Good Lord, I couldn't notice anything more than that in The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. What an absolutely brutal book that is. It's just incredibly brutal.
I think that's the same in some ways, even with The Honorable Schoolboy as well. When you just see the expendability of people and how so often, people are kind of sacrificed for the greater good, and as it were. So
do we think that Le Carré introduced that? That's certainly not present in Mystery of the Sands. That's certainly not present in John Buchan. You know very much in John Buchan who the good guys and the bad guys are.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And if we're saying, I'm sorry for all the literary questions. If we're saying that Le Carré introduced that element, then why?
I think it adds something. I mean, the problem with the earlier stuff, like you mentioned, Erskine Childers and John Buchan, I think well, Erskine Childers, of course, only wrote Riddle of the Sands, right, before he was shot himself, right? So, but Buchan, I think that it's a tricky period because I think because Richard Hannay is like part empire builder, kind of part secret agent, but it's so fledgling. I mean, I think even the idea of MI5 MI5 or MI6 at the time only comes about during pretty much the First World War, really. I mean, there's early kind of just proto things, but it's not until the conflict. So I think the world itself maybe is just that little bit less murky. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe there's a kind of naivety or innocence to the earlier stuff because they don't really know. You don't really get a lot of double agents and triple agents like you start to get during the Cold War, and there's not really the battle of ideologies that are so,
Also, what I'm saying is that in a general rule, the writings of older era were very constrained. You couldn't talk about certain subjects. You could not just say, you could not bring up sex. You could not use bad language, even though people were using bad language and visiting prostitutes all through the 19th century. You just weren't able to talk about it. And sooner or later, people started breaking barriers. And I guess either John le Carré or people said, the spies in the real world are not all white hat wearing good guys with morals of God and country and protecting the honor of women. You might have someone says, oh, well, that woman over there, it'd really be helpful if she were dead to our cause. And he goes out and kills her. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not pulling that from any story, but that you can start to write about that now. And
I don't know, Greg, because I think this is what's interesting about James Bond, whether he's written or whether he's filmed, is the different versions of Bond that you get. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but Roger Moore is a little bit kind of more comical, and he seems to be a bit kind of, what's the word? I don't remember him being particularly brutal to women, right? And using them in the same way that Connery did. And then you see that again, even a little bit with Daniel Craig. But I haven't read all the Bonds, but I seem to remember him being much happier to use them, even if it ended up in their deaths, then perhaps it's portrayed more in film. And that's, of course, a bit early. That was the 50s.
So, Mark, do you put any weight behind the supposition that the person who killed Erskine Childers was in fact Micah Cummins?
I think there's a good chance.
The evidence sort of leans that way.
Well, I know that Micah Cummins, of course, was a big supporter of home rule for Ireland and all this kind of stuff. And I don't know, they probably differed somewhere along the line. So yeah, I can see. But actually, I just want to say Tim brings up a good point. But again, it is post First World War, which I think has some impact on it. Is E. Phillips Oppenheim's great impersonation, where you aren't sure who even the protagonist is, rather than who the actual spy is.
Mentions Oppenheim. Oh my! Yeah. I love this chat. Oh my! I used to have a whole shelf of his little hardcovers. I wish I still did.
Yeah. And Aaron. So I guess established 1909. Was it Mansfield coming and whatnot? But they become independent services spring 1914. And I think one thing le Carré does do, although Aaron points out Somerset Maugham did the morally grey spy story before le Carré was born. But I think, I don't know about all the others. I guess Fleming, to some degree, of course, was in intelligence. But, le Carré was a spy during the early years of the Cold War. So it's a world he knows about. He's not, I don't know about, for example, Tom Clancy, whether he actually had a career in espionage before he became an author.
Tom Clancy, because he lived in sort of the area I grew up, he was an insurance salesman. But he read a lot of publicly available documents and just figured it out himself. And, you know, that's what he did. Now, like he said, Somerset Maugham was a spy too.
I'm still stuck on the mom, but still something about bringing in Ashenden strikes me as wrong in a little way. It's snagging on the carpet here, and I can't quite figure out why. That would be a conversation to figure out what is it that Le Carré is introducing that isn't there in Ashenden.
I think I have to read Ashenden now, you see, so I have to prepare for next week.
I do. It's one of Mom's less soppy things.
No, but it is a very curious. It is very curious. It is very curious where it all comes from. We have here as Fleming describing Bond as a blunt instrument.
Yes, the ironic thing about Bond is I always complain about Daniel Craig's performance, taking the humor out of Bond, taking the whimsy out of Bond, taking the quips out of Bond. And when I complain about that, I'm complaining purely about what he's doing to a cinematic creation. Daniel Craig is closer to the Bond in the books than any Bond. The Bond in the books is a humorless oaf, a humorless, brutal, knuckle-dragging oaf who couldn't crack a one-liner to save his life. But that's not what the movies did.
No, I mean, I'm going to say, because I just reread Casino Royale a week or two ago, and I'm going like, this is nothing like like Roger Moore, because in that book, he really doesn't do much except
he doesn't do much, and he has no charisma. Whereas the Bond movies before Craig were all about charisma.
Well, the problem with that is how you interpret through a book and through a movie. You cannot have a sour man in a movie the way you can in a book, because you have to portray that to the audience in a much different way.
That's true.
Yeah, well, Daniel Craig is sour throughout all the movies, but when he's not on screen, you're blowing up Venice. I guess that makes it okay.
I've got a question for you two, because obviously you're American, and although we're cousins, as it were, and a term used by Le Carré actually to describe the relationship between the CIA, I guess, and the circus. But why? I mean, if you ask almost anyone around the world to name a fictional spy, they're going to name James Bond, right? Pretty much, I would say. And why do you think it is that it's this British spy who's like super world famous? And okay, I can think of a couple of American ones, but it's never reached like the same. Why do you think that is? Considering, as you say, America played obviously a massive part, if not the biggest part, in the whole Cold War reality story.
It's the movies.
It is. I mean,
the movies.
But why do you think there hasn't been a character that kind of supplanted him, that came from the States?
Because they keep making more James Bond movies. They keep making it over again. Now, when you talk about characters from the book and versus movie, this is out of spy range, but it's a very classic thing that's actually reproduced in newspapers and articles. When you're talking about Frankenstein, how do you refer to his creator? Mark, what do you call his creator?
Dr. Frankenstein.
Wrong.
Mary Shelley?
No.
Victor Frankenstein.
What you got wrong? Steve, do you want to mark that wrong? When I asked about the creator in Frankenstein, what's his name?
I'm not sure what you're getting at.
In the story of Frankenstein, the creator of the monster, what's his name?
Victor Frankenstein.
You're right. Mark said Dr. Frankenstein.
It's true. I meant, of course, Victor, but I know what you mean.
But when people talk about that in like a newspaper, like Dr. Frankenstein's, we've created a Dr. Frankenstein's monster. Well, okay, you're only talking about the movie. You're not talking about, you've never read the book. Because if you read the book, you know he is not a doctor.
But I have read the book. But he does study. anatomy and stuff. Maybe he never graduates.
No, he never studied anatomy. He studied natural philosophy.
Okay, so he could still be a doctor scientist.
He's not. but the thing is,
philosophy.
And honestly, I think people who, if you were to write a review, not in the book and saying, well, Dr. Frankenstein's monster, some editor would put in doctor in front of it.
Good point.
But that's the thing, goes back to Bond, is people don't know the Bond from the books. They know the Bond from the movies. How many people actually read the novels now?
True.
They are sold at bookstores, so obviously some people are reading them, but
probably they get boost every time a film comes out. But that's
it.
Yeah, except for the next one. Who knows what the next one will be like? The last Daniel Craig Bond movie was a bit of a tough act to follow. If you know the plot, you're going to wonder how there's another James Bond movie. I think that Hollywood's idea will be that James Bond is not the only 007. He's not the only 00 agent. There could be another one.
Well, we've had 00 agents before, though. Otherwise, in the films,
you're wrong. What they're going to do is they're going to change his race and gender.
Yeah. Yes, but that can't be 007. That'll have to be. Oh God, I hope not. I won't be watching anyway.
They will just cast, because I've seen people talk about it. Well, you really should cast an African American as James Bond in the next time, because that's just what people do now.
Yes. I don't know.
It'll be interesting to see when they cast a Chinese American as Malcolm X in the next Malcolm X film. You see, so how far are you going to take it?
It doesn't work that direction.
No.
As long as it isn't Timothy Chalamet, that's fine by me either way. As long as it's not him.
And have you guys got a favorite spy film? Not including the Bond films and whatever. I'm just
Did
curious.
you get to the bottom of why people like this stuff?
No, I didn't say my reason. But I think if you were to ask me,
does that have something to do with it? That, like with a murder mystery, it's a solo protagonist?
Well, I think it's because there's that big crossover, isn't there? You get maybe more bang for your buck, because not only do you get quite often a murder mystery within a spy novel, but you get adventure stories as well. And all sorts of things going on. I mean,
and it's escapism.
Usually people are murdered. There's travel. Yeah. There's even action. There's adventure. There's all sorts in an espionage thriller that you wouldn't get in just a murder mystery or just an adventure book.
There are other things as well.
To Russia with Lust. Yeah.
I noticed one other element in that book, aside from adventure and mystery.
But there is that. Yeah, I mean, maybe not in some of the earlier stuff. Actually, I don't remember.
Over and over again in that book, we're told that the main character will do anything to serve her country, that she acts on duty. I got the distinct impression on page 30, 45, 47, 51, and 67 that she would do this anyway.
Why not? Bond's doing it, isn't he? So, but going back to The Spy Who Came In From a Cold, are we? When are we thinking of reading it? Because I think people kind of want to maybe keep in step with us. Are we gonna maybe read it starting from next week, or going to save it a bit for later on in the month? Or
well, at least in the US, we have this big event at the end of November called Thanksgiving, which people will be away for travel for a lot of people and staying with family members. So maybe the week before Thanksgiving. Does that sound?
But does that for what? For discussion?
Yeah, just have a live stream and open spoilers, just saying we're going to discuss everything about this book. So
I was going to ask privately, but since you bring it up, could we make sure to put that in big letters? I don't want to go through a whole discussion of this book worrying about spoilers. Can we just warn people ahead of time?
This is a book group. You're expected to have read the book.
Yeah,
go read the book group. And if you
we can say anyone can start basically from now before the week and up until the week before Thanksgiving and the whatever that Saturday is. So Thanksgiving's is it last Thursday in November?
Fourth Thursday.
The 23rd is Thanksgiving, so we can discuss it, say, on the 17th or 18th, something like that.
And will the discussion include our other loser hosts, the ones who aren't here now?
I hope so, yeah. That's why I said hopefully 17th or 18th to get at least as many of them on as possible. And yes, definitely spoilers. You can't talk about it without spoilers, I think. And the thing is, it is quite a quick, fast-paced, short read as well. So people should definitely get it done between there. And Bill's already halfway done with it anyway, so that's perfect.
It's 200 pages, though. But
yeah.
What about the
audio book was like 7 hours though? But does it take 7 hours to read 200 pages? I don't know.
What about when it comes to real life espionage? Do either one of you ever think of real life espionage? Have you ever met anyone that you suspected was not who they say they are?
Oh,
well, in your neck of the woods, it would be more prevalent, right?
Well, Steve, I live basically in a far suburbs of Washington, D.C.
You live very close. If I've gathered correctly from your videos, you live very close to what is called a bedroom community for the CIA.
Yes, we actually have a next door neighbor who did work for the CIA. He's like three houses up the street, and usually he got outed by a neighbor because he says, "Oh, I'm going to work in somewhere." He didn't say, "I'm working for the CIA," but says, "Well, how far do you drive?" And he says, and she's figured out, "Well, based on your time, you work for the CIA." And
is that person still around?
He's still up the street. I mean,
what about the one who outed him?
he was getting ready to retire anyway. Like he's now officially retired. So
retired, or was he retired?
He's walking around the neighborhood. He was actually at a dinner party last night up the street, so he's around. But he was an analyst, and when people work in DC, they say, like, I work for GSA, and they may not work for GSA. They may work. They say, my wife works for GSA, and I sometimes say, do you really work for GSA? If I am married to you for all these years and you're actually a CIA's analyst spy? But no, she's not, because she works from home and I can hear her conversations. And no, she's not a spy, unfortunately.
GSA, and there's another 3-letter department. I can almost remember what it was, that forever and ever has also been a catch-all, where people just say, I work for this department, because they know you don't know what it is. It's not one of the famous 3-letter departments, so they can just say it. They know they can't hide the fact that they work for the government, but they just say it because it's not one of the ones that has a reputation.
Well, it's very common. I used to work with a girl whose father, she says, well, my father works for an agency that I'm not allowed to tell you what he works for. And the thing is, they tell their families, like, you cannot ask me about my job. It's just, and I guess they're not even high-level spies. They're kind of like mid-level bureaucratic spies that you don't talk about your day job because you're dealing with that information. But then there may be some people who are married to spies and don't know it.
Yeah. Yeah, I always thought that the idea of spies in real life was that it was the fodder for a paranoid mind. And then for 4 years, the president of the United States was a paid Russian asset and was actively, openly disseminating high-profile, eyes-only intelligence reports to known enemies of the United States on camera. And has continued to do so since. Tells Israel's nuclear profile to the Saudi Arabians for $2 billion. All that's missing is the signed check. He's still doing it. He's still fencing this material. So now I don't think of it as a seedbed for paranoia anymore.
I always find it funny that in America you guys have the Secret Service and they actually drive around in vehicles that say Secret Service on them, which I always think is quite amusing. But
when it started, it wasn't. When it started, it was secret.
Yeah,
it was just
right.
When it started, they were plainclothesmen in any crowd, and you didn't know who they were. And there was a lightning rod to distract your attention because the president had a military aide with gold epaulettes and a plume in his hat and whatnot, who went everywhere with him. That the president doesn't have that anymore. So, but the agents are far more noticeable. Although they weren't in the Oval Office when then President Donald Trump told the press and his staff to leave the Oval Office and leave him alone with the Russians. Took photos of himself shaking their hands, took photos of himself ushering out all accountable Americans so that he could have a nice, cozy chat with the Russians in the Oval Office. That puts all of this spy stuff that I'm reading in a completely surreal light.
And you're forgetting the meeting in Helsinki.
The meeting at Helsinki, yes, where he meets with Russia's ruthless dictator and instructs all Americans to be gone. Americans cannot listen.
I just want to say, like, in case anyone from those secret services are watching this, that the views expressed are not necessarily my own, given that I live much closer to said hotspots than other people. So, you know. But it's interesting what when you say about the reality of it. I've known a few. I actually went to school probably with several children of working spies, because I went to the International School of Stockholm as a child, and it was in 1991 that I went there, and without a doubt, you always knew the spies when their father's job titles something, third cultural attaché, or sports advisory, exactly. Yeah. So.
A lot of spying is probably just analysis work.
Yeah, boring.
And the fact that you're dealing with top secret and you can't talk about it is just kind of an open secret. You just don't ask what Daddy did at work today.
Well, it's like you mentioned with Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, how much of it we're seeing through the viewpoint of reports on desks.
Yeah,
it's not all shoot 'em ups in the field.
I think that's the wonderful thing about it, is that kind of realism that you don't get with like the Bond movies or.
But the Bond, at least the one Casino Royale I reread, there really is no shoot 'em up action in that book. I think he has a gun, but it's really not used, and he's no.
Greg, do you remember? Do either of you remember? Did the Bond movies get novelizations that were faithful to what we saw on the screen instead of in the book?
I don't remember those.
I know that like Moonraker and Casino Royale, they got reissued with movie covers, but did they also get novelizations where someone wrote up the screenplay?
I don't remember.
I think there were novelizations maybe of later, because obviously the books he didn't write.
Yeah.
They
released probably things like GoldenEye as a novel, and obviously a computer game that probably did fit in with.
Of course, GoldenEye makes me think of No-vember.
Yeah. No,
which automatically gets me laughing when I think of those movies. I didn't think that Bond-style espionage movies could survive being satirized that well, but they came back. They always come back.
It's funny because we have 31 people watching us, which I know is quite small for you, of course, Steve. With your
I can't 100. See the chat. Is there something?
No, I can because I'm hosting it. It shows me, but I'm curious how many people are actually taking part, because I don't think we have a huge amount. Because we do have a Discord. I don't know if anyone's actually gone on it. Every time I look, I seem to be the only one there, but that's all right. That is something you can do, and it might be nice to post a few things on there because it is such an interesting and engaging subject, whether it's to do with books or not. I've already mentioned one podcast. Another one I would just like to give a shout out to, which is really, really worth everybody's time. If they want something different to listen to, is what it's called Cold War Conversations. And I don't know if anyone's listened to this, but it's fascinating. It's just this guy who just started it as like a hobby, I think, if I remember rightly. He's not a professional historian or anything, I don't think. And he just started talking to a couple of people about their experiences and reminiscences about the Cold War. And then, of course, he just got big. So he's speaking to former U.S. General so and so who was like the last general to leave Germany, or and this kind of stuff. It's extremely interesting. He speaks.
It's always amazing to me. That aspect of podcasts is always amazing to me. That you don't have to make a big splash to start getting guests who are serious figures in whatever field you're talking about.
Yeah.
It seems incredibly egalitarian in a way that news programs are not anymore.
Yeah.
I think that's really neat. I really like that. I don't listen to them, but I like that aspect of them.
It's definitely one worth listening to. Sorry?
So you went to Stockholm School in 1991, surrounded by the children of espionage agents.
Yeah.
And Mark was in the Soviet Union on the last minute of the last hour of the last day that it was the Soviet Union. So now I'm starting to wonder if this whole event is a psyop of some kind. What is going on here?
People
Greg
often
lives 2 doors over from Ceausescu's former head of security in a CIA bedroom community. What's going on here?
Maybe
people do often joke about me here, right? Because I am living here in Eastern Europe. I live alone with a dog, and I have this kind of quiet life, and I'm doing this kind of stuff. And of course, in reality, I probably would be a better fit than someone like James Bond, who's very charismatic and stands out. I'm just trudging. George Smiley is a prime example of that. He's just completely grey and a nobody, and he just appears and floats away and disappears, and it's just brilliant. And I think,
well, see, I don't know you, Mark, but maybe your real job is to talk to these children that you teach and figure out which one of their parents has information, and you just then feed it into reports. And if Mark turns up assassinated next week, I did him in.
You might very well think that, but I couldn't possibly comment. But it's funny because it's a little bit off topic, but there's a wonderful film. It's a Czech and Slovak film. It was on Netflix, and it's called The Teacher, I think. And it's based on a true story of a woman who was her local Communist Party chairwoman, and she taught Russian in a local, I guess like a local elementary / junior high school, something like that, because they cross the different years here. And what she used to do on like the first day of term was she would get all the children to introduce themselves and then say what their parents did for a living. And then she used that to her advantage completely. So it's like she had a sister living in Moscow, and she found out that, little Yana's father worked at the airport. So she baked her sister a cake and somehow got this guy to get, and all these different things. Little Vojta's dad runs a garage, so she has a problem with her car. And she just uses throughout the whole film, she's just using more and more of these kind of connections until like the parents try to, rebel against her and this kind of stuff. But it's a really, really good film. Very interesting. So, and also related, of course, to the Cold War, or at least the communist time.
Another question?
Yeah.
When it comes to the two of you, do you have any really favorite works of literature that involve espionage that take place before or after our parameters? Mark, you already mentioned your beloved Raj. You've already mentioned that, but I'm just wondering.
Kim is a great book for sure,
and I automatically thought of the Aubrey and Maturin novels.
Yeah, of course.
Maturin is such a great character, and that is such an active part of every book. But it's too early. It comes before our time.
The one book that I want to revisit is Joseph Conrad's The Secret Agent. I've read it twice, I think, and I really need to dig into it. And because that again was published in 1907, I think. So it is before. And he also wrote the Under Western Eyes, which I have not read yet, which is also set at the time of the Russian Revolution. So maybe that one could count. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
what about Dennis Wheatley, the creator of the Toff series? Didn't he have a series of books about a spy in Napoleonic era?
Dennis Wheatley did black magic stuff.
Well, he was incredibly prolific. he did that and a lot of other stuff. But I'm trying to remember if I could swear that someone wrote a long series of adventures of a spy in the Napoleonic era, and I can't remember. I want to say Dennis Wheatley, but I can't remember.
I don't remember. I don't know.
Doesn't Flashman do a bit of spying on occasion?
He does.
Not particularly well, but he does sometimes.
And I think there's a little bit of espionage in the Sharp books as well. I think certainly in the series, I can't, they kind of mash into one in my head.
Flashman is most likely to do his espionage.
Here you go. Tim's come to your rescue there.
Oh, look at that! Well, you have a very knowledgeable chat, don't you?
I'm very lucky.
It's kind of amazing.
I'm very lucky there.
They always have they're always Johnny on the spot with the Wikipedia entries. So far, it's pretty impressive.
It is.
Okay, so Dennis Wheatley. So, am I right in remembering that he wrote a lot of them, or maybe not?
Okay. Then comes in here. It's interesting. It says Lenin is a character, fictionalized character in Under Western Eyes, which could be kind of interesting. But there's a few. I think you mentioned Riddle of the Sands, Steve. I think that is a great book. That's a good spy book. And one
spy books are still being written.
For sure.
It's not. They don't need the Soviet Union for it.
No, but there was kind of more of a romance of that, I think. But and I know this is a book, but I haven't read it. But it is probably one of my favorite espionage films. Is The Lady Vanishes? The old Hitchcock. Because she's a little old lady and she's basically a spy. And I can't remember. I'm sure Aaron will tell me who wrote the book. Because it wasn't until recently that I found out it was actually based on a book. So Dennis Wheatley's French Revolutionary Napoleonic era spy series was Roger Brooke. He also wrote a 1930s World War II spy series with Gregory Sallust. His Julian Day books were set in World War II. So,
goodness. Wait, does that mean your chat is fighting with each other?
I think they are having a little bit of a disagreement, yes.
Oh, goodness gracious. Well, I'm certain I can't go anywhere. I can't look up anything or I'll blot myself out of the chat. I can't verify one way or another.
I'm not looking up anything either.
And what about you, Steve? Have you a favorite series or a spy book that takes place either before or after the time we're speaking about?
Well, for me, it would be the Stephen Maturin thread that runs throughout the Aubrey and Maturin books. There's one. There are two books where it's foremost, and there's one book where we do a lot of following Stephen Maturin around. And fans of the book were impatient because they wanted to get back on the high seas with Jack Aubrey. But I love the book because we are, from the beginning of that series, we are invited to view Maturin as a helpless fifth wheel. He doesn't know anything about the sea. He's useless on a vessel. He gets seasick. You can count on him to fall into the ocean at the slightest possibility. And yet, when we sense right away, in the very first book, we sense right away that there's bad blood between him and one of Aubrey's officers, that they know each other from Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is raised after we've seen this foppish Maturin, this guy who's, he's a bookworm. He's lost in his own head. He's poorly dressed. He's little and scrabbly. He falls into the ocean. After we're invited to think of him as a comical character, the prospect that these two are going to duel to the death comes up. And the narrative just offhandedly says that Maturin is absolutely sure he can kill the guy. And it comes out of nowhere. You don't know. You're not expecting it at all. And we get very few hints of that until later on in the series when we follow Maturin into one of his espionage adventures, where he does kill people instantly, quickly, and without any thought at all. Forehead shots with a pistol that he has up his sleeve. That was not a Maturin that we'd ever seen before, and that I thought was really neat.
Now, do you think Patrick O'Brian knew that before he started his series, or
I don't think he did. I think he did, yeah.
Or is that something?
Did he have some experience with that world? If I'm thinking, maybe he did do something in the Second World War, didn't he? I'm
ashamed to say there are two really well-regarded biographies of him. I haven't read either one of them, so I don't know. I don't know if he was part of that world. I also don't know whether or not he knew Le Carré. I think they were co-evils. It's entirely possible they knew each other. Surely your chat will be able to dig that up.
I'm sure they will. Yeah, they'll probably produce a photograph of the two together.
I really, really like the one quality they very much have in common, which is that they respect their readers' intelligence. They don't spoon feed you things. Either one of them. I really like that. That's what I was getting in trouble with Mark Richardson, because I went from a reread of The Spy Who Came In From the Cold to a reread of The Eye of the Needle by Ken Follett, and I was just I've never had such a strong reaction to a reread. I shouldn't have read them back to back. I was reading Eye of the Needle and thinking, you don't need to tell me that. What on earth? Why are you doing this? You don't need to spoon feed me this. Cut these 4 pages out. I don't need them at all.
Mystery and Mayhem brings up Len Deighton there and his spy novels. So he was very popular.
If Mystery and Mayhem read a spy novel, that voice of his, wouldn't that be something? I swear, BookTube has a handful of people whose reading voices are superb. I'm not one of them, so I'm naturally envious.
Well, Sean's come to my rescue here. The Wheel Spins by Ethel Lena White is the Lady Vanishes book. So, yeah, that's definitely one I have to read. And, of course, Sean's favorite spy novel, Mr. Standfast by John Buchan. They are good fun, though, these early...
Sean's nom de plume notwithstanding, it's a heck of a book. It really is.
But they're just good fun, the kind of those era books. In the same way that, I mean, is Le Carré fun? I don't know, but certainly they are
really enjoyable. I wouldn't say fun.
Yeah.
My wife had read Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy before, and he says, you really need a college education to get through this book, because it's I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's not what you would think of as a spy story. If you're thinking James Bond, you're not.
If you're thinking James Bond,
you are not going to be happy with Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy.
Yeah,
at all.
Honestly, Greg, you need to watch it. I think it's well worth you watching it. I'm
still kind of amazed that you have somehow missed Alec Guinness as George Smiley. I mean, I'm almost afraid to ask if you've seen Derek Jacobi as Claudius. Oh, this can't be happening. This can't be happening. We're talking television, the absolute pinnacle of television performances. Okay, all right. This next one's going to kill me if you shake your head. Jeremy Brett as Sherlock Holmes.
No.
Mark and I are speechless.
You're retired, Greg. You need to do some of this stuff.
The problem is that I don't pay for TV services.
They're all on YouTube. They're all YouTube. You can watch the whole of Tinker Tailor. There's but of course they're British, yeah. So it's like there's only 5 or 6 episodes, right? And Smiley's People, or maybe there's even 4. I can't remember. But it's definitely worth your time. It's not like you're thinking like a big Hollywood production. It is a little BBC, low budget. It's Alec Guinness and a cast of well-known, fantastic actors just acting out the book the best they can within the combat and doing it so well.
Okay, but Mark, no offense, but he has to see I, Claudius first.
Which is probably also on YouTube. I don't know. But definitely all the Jeremy Bretts are on YouTube, and all the Tinker Tailors are as well. So.
Dare I ask about Leo McKern as Rumpole of the Bailey?
Well, I've seen that, but
I basically stopped watching movies, TV.
Clearly.
Around 96, I just threw in the towel, and
Well, these are all before 96. You should have watched it.
But the thing is, because when you're living at home, you don't want to watch anything because you don't want to watch stuff with your whole family watching you.
Yeah.
And then when I started living on my own, it's like I didn't have access to any of this stuff. I mean, this was when I first started living on my own. it was not common to have a VHS player in your home. It was, you didn't have it because that only came about 5-10 years later. So I remember my first apartment, I just had a TV with a rabbit ears.
Oh, wow.
So occasionally you would get like I, Claudius on PBS. If you could get to PBS station.
I mean, the unfortunate thing sometimes with these YouTube things is because I recently read To Serve Them All My Days, and I thought I saw it's on YouTube, but unfortunately the quality it was just so poor. Yeah, I couldn't even start watching it, unfortunately. But there's a lot of stuff out there.
So we neither one of you has, to recap, neither one of you has had any firsthand contact with espionage that you know of.
Well, I couldn't tell you if I had, could I?
We're not going to admit to it.
Well, look, I mean, I do think sometimes it is interesting. I mean, I've met a few people here that had some interesting roles like 40 years ago and did some interesting stuff. You've always got to be wary as well when you live in a country like this, I think, when you meet people who traveled extensively during that time. Because whether or not they did anything untoward, there's almost like an unspoken feeling of they did something untoward because they were able to travel, right? Because people who were like openly against it generally couldn't travel, couldn't leave the Eastern Bloc. But anyone who seemed to manage to go west during that period, they might have gone there for innocent reasons, but you can be sure that they were asked to do something else while they were there. Probably.
Yeah, their location itself. Yeah. Oh, yeah. My. That's a point that comes up in Young Mungo by Douglas Stewart. His character just routinely mentions that any cab driver could be a murderer. You have no idea. You have no idea what they've done.
Oh, is that in Northern Ireland?
Yeah.
So it's like the Shankill butchers, yeah, who drove around in the cabs and horrible. But like here as well, you forget that like espionage also went on a local level. But like, you know, the East Germans had the Stasi, yeah, and here we had the STB, and neighbors spied on neighbors here. You know, people are watching everybody all the time, and there's still that distrust, really. And people know, this is the horrible thing, is people know even today who had a reputation for doing that and maybe who did that. You know, I was in a village not long after I got here, and you know, I spoke far less Czech than I do now. And a new friend of mine took me back to his house, and I met his father. And of course, you know, we're drinking hard liquor like a Slivovitzer, you know, this plum liquor.
I remember, like paint varnish.
People start talking about it. Of course, I'm interested. I start asking about it. You know, the word that kept coming up all the time was like catastrophe. You know, it was a big catastrophe. All this kind of stuff. My friend's dad's drunk. We're walking up to the pub. We pass a house. He uses like some big expletives about the person who lived in the house, because the person who used to live in the house, he's dead, but his widow still lives there, was like the regional communist, like what do you call it? Like not commissar, but you know, like for the village, yeah.
Oh my!
And of course, we go up to the village. We start drinking. They start talking about it. There's a band playing. They start playing some music. And then, like, completely paradoxical or whatever, the band strikes up because everybody's drunk. The Russian song, if you know Kalinka Malinka, a Little Raspberry, you know, which I think Rebrov or somebody sings, you know, a very famous one. And of course, they get up, they all start dancing, like, you know, and singing along. And like 2 seconds ago, they were talking about damn Russians, hate them all, you know, and then it's like, Way! So it's like very strange sometimes, you know. So, yeah. And it's very nice too when I can talk to people about their memories, because it's something I want to include as well. Is the collapse, is the end of it all. I have a non-fiction book here called The Collapse by, is it Jarot or something? It's a bit too far away for me to read. Which follows it. I've got Timothy Garton Ash's The Magic Lantern.
Does your copy of The Collapse have any interesting blurbs? on the dust jacket?
We'll have a look.
Probably a UK edition. So it probably does not.
But I think what Mark was saying is like I get about the espionage after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and we still see evidence of that today. Like you're saying, like Steve, we had a Russian paid agent as a president. Imagine the coup of that one.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is he really an agent, or is he just a really stupid man who owed money to Putin?
Stupid man who owed money to Putin, his friends, his stupid son saying on the golf course, we get all our money from Russia. All the deals that are now routinely swept away as the paranoia of Rachel Maddow. Russiagate, Russia, why didn't she lose her job? When, okay, if you're going to say that, you have to dismiss, you have to somehow explain the chains of facts. And no one does. They just say, oh, it's just Russia. It was crazy. Sure, I thought all of that. Just a dumb, useful idiot for the Kremlin. Until it became overt. Until that meeting in Helsinki. Until he ushering his ministers out of the Oval Office. We can talk with the Russians on his own. After that, there was no useful idiot thought in my mind anymore. That is active collusion.
I think it's the American version because it only has US dollars and Canadian dollars, and I've only got two things on the back, and I don't know if you write under the name Fareed Zakaria, but
no, I am not Fareed Zakaria.
Otherwise Washington Post. So
inside first page.
What have I got?
More blurbs.
Oh yeah, there are a few here. The Economist, BBC History, Zakalo, Fareed Zakaria again, Wall Street Journal, Economist, Guardian, Telegraph, Foreign Affairs, Financial Times, Winnipeg Free Press. Is that you?
Notice how low on the totem pole he had to get before he thought to associate it with me. It wasn't
the Pittsburgh Post Gazette. Diplo, Book List, no, Publishers Weekly, Kirkus.
What does Kirkus say?
A rigorous sifting of evidence surrounding the final toppling of the, oh gosh, I can't even read that. Sclerotic? Is that right? Sclerotic?
Yeah.
Sclerotic East German state with extensive use of Stasi files. Sarot finds that accident rather than planning caused the collapse of the Berlin Wall. This account amply conveys the universal amazement and excitement of the time.
Yeah, because some local nobody official made an inadvertent announcement on television and set off a wave of people rushing to the wall. There was no way to turn it back. The thing that you always notice about events like that is that would have been true no matter when it happened.
Yeah,
if East Germans had rushed the wall at any time, it would have collapsed. It's because what can you do against that? You could mow everybody down, but not many people are going to want to do that, go into history that way.
No. Did it ring any bells, that one? Or
just a few?
Okay.
well written blurb. Would you say it's a better written blurb than any of the other blurbs?
It certainly stood out to me as probably the best blurb that was there.
Just looking for that. He's just looking for that book that he's blurbed in the owner.
Well, I found Steve on a blurb. I didn't buy the book yet though because it was quite pricey. But it was the I think I sent you a screenshot last year of it, Steve, because I was looking on Amazon, and it was the Norton annotated Bible.
Yes, I blurbed on the Bible.
Blurb right on there.
It's pricey. Those Norton Critical Bibles are pricey. They're wonderful, but they are. You have one of them behind you, don't you?
No, I have the Penguin Bible.
Well, on the other side, you have Norton Criticals.
No,
no,
no, I haven't any Nortons there. I don't think. No, it's just Oxford's Penguins, vintage. So.
In the late 1980s and early 1990s, I knew very well the son of a Russian defector who was able to go on and on. He also was fond of the paint varnish Eastern Europe drinks. I swear, that's an acquired taste. It really is. Never really worked for me. But
it is also
they
funny, like
symbols, and you can run a government on them. The alcohol content. So it's
well, I'm listening as well at the moment to Simon Sebag Montefiore's The Court of the Red Tsar. I'm listening to it as an audiobook at night. And, it's funny there, the drinking and parties and things, not completely similar to Peter the Great, of course, actually a little bit less raucous than Peter the Great. But what was I going to say? Oh, actually, I should do a couple of comments quickly. So we got Tim's Too Many Books. His parents lived upstairs from Len Dayton. So there we go. That's pretty cool. And Mystery Mayhem will make a note on narrating a novel. So there we go.
Those deep pipes of yours, I swear. I'm not sure that it'd be a mystery novel, but some novel, something in the common domain would work wonderfully.
Green Mantle is interesting. Eerie accurate, predicting that Germans are actually trying to do in the Middle East in World War One. Yeah. Well-written American spy fiction. Check out Matt Helm novels by Donald Hamilton. Nothing like the movies. Putin's been busily assassinating former Russian oligarchs in the UK for the past few years. And he was in Hungary in the winter of '89. Well, that's pretty cool. Ryan, hi. Finally, the BookTube event for us. Yes.
We're missing hosts. We have 2 hosts missing.
We do. We probably actually technically have 3, because I'm sure Mr. Standfast, had he not been so preoccupied with all the house move and stuff, probably would have wanted to have joined in as a host of this event as well. If they tried to rush the war before Gorbachev, the Soviets would have intervened and gunned them down, especially if Andropov, the veteran of Hungary,
I disagree. Andropov would have gunned down 2 people, 3 people, but Tiananmen Square, he would not have done. I think it would have been vulnerable at any time.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of those weird things, I think, and it's what I find interesting. Why I mentioned the collapse is because, of course, the end of it all isn't that long ago, and I work with people still. They're only in their early 50s who were college students in Prague in 1989, and remember it like yesterday. And I love the fact I can talk to them about it. People who were actually there, and you ask them these questions, and it's like, it's so fascinating to me, the fact that, like, one day there's this regime and the next day it's gone, like completely gone. And how did people react, and how was it? And I never get tired of asking people and talking about it. I don't like to push too much on other things, because I know, obviously some people do have, like, either things they're ashamed about from their family or things they are upset about, because of punishments and whatever, and things that happened during the 50s and whatnot.
Yeah, it's always amazing when you talk to people whose lives have brushed against history with a capital H. So not the daily events of the day, but huge history. And keep in mind, we're all that. We're all that. Thanks to just a couple of events in the last 6 years, 7 years, we're all that. But
well, I mean, it surprised me, like, going into, like, the school staff rooms. A lot of them, like in the one I used to work in this town, still had the bust of Lenin. But what they'd done was they had redecorated him and applied paint to him, and kind of just changed it a little bit. I think they put some facial hair, because they wanted him to be like, I don't know if you'll know him, Steve, but the Czechs have, like, a famous make-believe character started by a guy called Jan Verich, called Yara Zimmerman. And so they wanted him to be like that. But because I said to him, I said, who is this strange character that they have in this marble bust that they've been, graffitiing on, basically? And he said, oh, it used to be Lenin. So it's like, and of course, all people my age and young and older, they were all, youth pioneers or communist youth scouts and this kind of thing, which is also kind of interesting. And one of the most interesting things of people I met here was I was teaching a girl about 8-9 years ago and she was telling me the story of how her parents met. And I thought it would be like, oh, they met, you know, whatever. No, they met they met in North Korea back in the 80s in a communist youth camp.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
You know, that's not going to happen to many people, is it? What have we got here quickly? Christina says fiction picks going to read One Night in Winter by Simon Sebag Montefiore and or The Big Green Tent by Ludmila Ulitskaya. Ryan, may I suggest A Little Drummer Girl for this month, set in the Middle East and has never been more timely. Yeah, that's a good shout, that one, actually. I wouldn't mind reading that again. The Spaminator is saying the one event that he doesn't need to bother with lived it all. World Spamination and espionage go together like peanut butter and ladies. Reading Winter by Len Dayton, which
I thought it was World War II.
Yeah.
Ryan says, can you recommend a novel for this month besides The Spy That Came In From the Cold?
Something wrong with The Spy Who Came In From the Cold?
Maybe you read it last week. I don't know.
I recommended a few in my announcement video. It depends if you want a shorter novel or a longer novel. I really liked The Company by Littell. That was that's a long, that's like 800, 900 pages. So
fantastic, though. Just fantastic.
There's another one. Oh God. Victor, I recommend it. It's I'll have to look at it. It's about the journalist who gets a call from a spy, and he says, "Oh, he meets with the spy," and then the spy is murdered, and he has to. It's about a Russian spy. Oh God, Victor something. I'm trying to remember the name. That's a much shorter book. It was recommended by Nancy Pearl, Masterwork, whatever. The Seattle librarian. I'm drawing a big blank on the name now.
I'm sorry, I'm being joined by my Leninist dictator here. Oh no, don't show her that. She thinks dogs are lazy layabouts. Don't you? Oh, you wouldn't yell at Elvis, would you? You wouldn't yell at him, would you?
Have either of you tried is it Mick Herron or Mike Herron, the Slow Horses books? Because I haven't, but I did watch the first series during my Apple TV free trial and thought it was actually pretty good. So I wondered if the books were worth reading.
The books are worth reading.
Oh, good. What have we got here? Could you? Okay, we've done that. Christina's nonfiction flick is Che by John Lee Anderson.
It's a good biography.
Wow. What a poet. What a pick. That was a really good book.
Nowadays, GCSE kids answer the question, why did the Berlin Wall collapse? Some bright spark answers a structural engineering fault.
Also, for nonfiction, you might want to think of Serhii Plokhy.
Yeah.
Cambridge historian over my Cambridge, not your Cambridge, Mark. He did a book called The Man with the Poison Gun. That's terrific. Really does read like something out of James Bond. Really does.
No. Have either of you two read any nonfiction by Ben McIntyre?
Oh yeah.
I've got one of his books lined up. I've read two before: Operation Mincemeat and The Spy and the Traitor. So,
is the Spy, because I get confused, because is The Spy and the Traitor about Philby, or is it the one about Oleg? The
Spy and the Traitor. I mean, there was a spy working for Great Britain or the United States in the Soviet Union, and Philby outed him. And so then the story is how to get our asset out of Russia, and because he was working for them, and they said it's sort of up to us to make sure that he doesn't get killed by. So,
because there's the guy. Oh, I forget his family name. Oleg Grodonsky.
I think that might be the guy who was the asset.
But I read his autobiography, and that it's called Next Stop Execution, and that was really interesting. Don't look at me like that, Steve. If you can't think of anything better to go with peanut butter, if you can think of anything better to go with peanut butter, I'd like to hear it.
I raised my eyebrows because I've never heard the pairing of peanut butter and women before. It's not a particularly good pairing, and it might go a long way to explaining why the Spaminator is not a particularly good double agent. This might be the reason right there.
Have you the company? Thank you. Oh, okay. You've read all the Le Carré, Ryan. Yeah. I haven't read all of them. I've read quite a few, but not all.
You've read all of Le Carré, and you're wondering what to read next. The company's fine. If you have already read John Buchan, if you haven't read the Hannay novels of John Buchan, you really should give one or two of them a try. They're really, really good.
Well, I've read his 39 Steps.
Yeah, that's the famous one, and he's just in terms of the product of an Edwardian education, the writing is simply better in those books than anything that we're talking about. So even just on that level alone, boy, oh boy, are they good. No, they are really, really good. Not to set priorities or anything, if you want to read about the CIA.
Yeah, it's interesting how it's, of course, there's. I wonder how many people read things that aren't either British, American, or Russian around the Cold War, like the French experience. Well, I don't know, because I mean there are different experiences. As I said, I mean even I should look into something Czech that I can read. I mean, it's easy to read Czech stuff set, of course, during communism, but whether or not
what would be the point of reading any kind of literature that isn't British, American, or Russian? What would be the point of doing that? Well, I know the other nations try, sure, but
are there any French espionage books?
Oh, please. Oh, please.
Actually, I'm glad Tim's. Ryan, 39 Steps. You'll read it in an afternoon. It is a very, very short book, but a great introduction to the world of Richard Hannay.
Yeah, Ryan, if you haven't, I mean, 39 Steps, yes, it's a great introduction, but you could go on from there. His books are incredible.
For sure.
I love Littell's book, The Company. It's a really, really involving thriller, but there's really no comparing the two. If you haven't read both of them, you got to start with Buchan, I would think.
And actually, I'm so pleased that Tim's mentioned him, because he's well worth reading and mentioning. Is Graham Greene. I mean, I can't believe we haven't mentioned him.
I have my issues with Graham.
Well, why did I know something? Oh, I really like The Quiet American, and I really like Our Man in Havana and the third Man. And I know Steve's going to say he has issues with it.
Well, this is why I love Book 2, because you've got somebody saying, try The Human Factor. Okay, I haven't read The Human Factor in 40 years. So, and
it seems Ryan's on your side there. He's a horrific writer, apparently. So I'll tell you what is good. I don't have it to hand. I'm sure you've probably read it, Steve. Is actually there's a nice Penguin. It's either Penguin or Vintage collection of Green's essays, and actually they're kind of interesting, because he writes a really good essay about Henry Rider Haggard, actually, which
he's doing my job. He's fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Where he's got a deadline, where he's got 50 pounds on the line, where he's got an editor who's going to read every word and keep him on his task. Where his deadline is, you get the book in the mail on Monday. You've got to have your 800 words to your editor by Thursday morning, first thing. If you don't, that editor is going to have a blank spot on his page. He doesn't have any backup for you, so you will ruin him, and he will make sure to ruin you. Well, if you get the book on Monday and your copy has to be done on a typewriter, ready with mimeographs, and sent to your editor on Thursday morning, then you can't lose the whole week inside a gin bottle. You can't do it, or everything goes to ruin for nothing. So you get a different Graham Greene. You get a very less self-indulgent Graham Greene in his deadline prose. But The Human Factor, you've got to vote in favor of it. I must have it as an ebook.
I just really like The Quiet American. I thought I really
Oh my
enjoyed
God.
it. And I
Greg
thought,
turns over to find his Graham Greene, and what do we see? 100 New York Review of Books paperbacks. Oh my God. Oh
and
my
a
God.
massive Rebecca West as well behind him.
There's just nothing he doesn't have in that bookseller of his. It's just incredible. I would never leave that room.
And it was a surprisingly good film as well, I thought, The Quiet American. They did that really well. But actually, Ryan, I could suggest one to you. I don't know who's read.
What is this Graham Greene business? The Quiet American movie stank like meat left out in the sun.
No, I really enjoyed it, but hey ho. But Ryan, you could try one I really enjoyed, which I guess not particularly famous, but there were books by a guy Gavin Lyle. They're kind of around the First World War, early spy books. It's he's kind of it's no, I think it's after the war. Yes, because it's like him and his Batman or something. I don't know, his valet or something from the war. They somehow meet again and they embark on this career of espionage, and it's typical gentleman with his loyal, manservant. But that's good fun. And then something
I always expect you to have a Batman. I always expect you to mention that in a video. I'm assuming that when the house is done, it will have a Batman.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind. Yeah, it would be fine. But there's also a nice series, which is, again, I don't really know. It touches on espionage, certainly later on. And that's I've mentioned them on my channel quite a lot, is the Station series by David Downing, I think. The Effie Cohen and John Russell series. They're good fun. I'm just thinking for Ryan there. So slightly off topic, but my favorite Buchan book so far is John McNabb, about one of his spies, but slumming on a poaching trip in Scotland. A comedy of manners, quiet and rich. Alan Firth.
Yeah. Biography of Sir Walter Scott. So I'm no one to talk.
I had to make sure to put in an appearance. There are certain factions of BookTube that theorize Steve and I are the same person. I can prove that wrong with this sentence. Kurt Vonnegut is all right.
I didn't know about these factors of BookTube at all. Well, I'm most of the people in my chat, the people that usually show up in my chat are often eerily well informed about me, and they sometimes make really good guesses, even when they don't have information. And so I'm kind of relieved. Your chat is far more bookish, far more knowledgeable. And no one in a chat that I'm involved in, we've been going on for an hour and a half, no one has mentioned someone named Gary Powers. That is amazing to me. In my chat, that would have happened in the first 30 minutes. What's the matter, baby? What you doing?
I'm not sure I know who Gary Powers is.
I don't know who Gary Powers is.
We don't need to worry about it.
Okay.
Not at all. But Kurt Vonnegut stinks. And when he was alive, he also physically stank. He smelled like an ashtray. Couldn't write good prose if you stuffed him to the gills with amphetamines. And we know this because he was often stuffed to the gills with amphetamines. First Graham Greene, and now Kurt Vonnegut. But the difference being, Graham Greene I will give another try. Absolutely. I will try The Human Factor. Greg's going to send me his copy of The Dying Earth by Jack Vance. He's going to include that paperback of The Human Factor, which is very nice of him to do. It's amazing the things we do here on BookTube for each other.
Maybe, you never know.
But Mark, I can't help but notice something. I talk about being off topic. There's a thing that happens in every one of your live streams. I watch it every single time without fail.
Yeah.
It's this kind of picture of Dorian Gray thing that happens to you where you get more and more disheveled as the live goes on. And some of the ones that you do with Sean, I swear by the end, it doesn't look like you're going to live to sign off. I wonder why that is.
Honestly, I think it's because I live in a very different time scale to a lot of people, because here life starts really early in the morning. Yeah. So I get up every day at 4:30 and walk Elvis, even in the winter. And, it's coming up now to 9:20. So it feels like it's probably later in the day than for a lot of people. And it's one of these weird things because I couldn't get used to it. Like when I first came here, the very first day I arrived, they told me my first lesson was the following day at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I was thinking, did I hear you right? 6 a.m. And they're like, yeah, 6 a.m. I was like, okay, we'll pick you.
Winter.
We'll pick you up at 5:15. And I'm thinking, you will? Okay. Apparently it's something to do with the old emperor Franz Joseph. He was a big like early riser, like really early riser, and so his government got up with him, and of course, everyone else got up, and so here people work like from 6 till 2, and that's their working day. So most Czechs, it's probably different in Prague because obviously being more international, but here most Czechs finish their working day by 2:30.
I have to tell you, I had that schedule in Washington, programmer. I loved it.
Yeah.
The only problem was I got transferred to a different department, and the VP is one of those people who like to roll into work around 9:30 or 10. And so by 9:30 or 10, my day was half over almost, and I'm going like, no, I'm not staying till 6 p.m. today.
We've got here Daniel Silva. Yeah, I've heard of his books, but I haven't read any.
I've read one. It's something about an art critic, art painter, who's also a spy or something. I read so many years ago. I can't recall anything other than that.
Actually, Heather brings up a good point here because
I was going to say that comment. I want to get some.
We haven't touched on that at all, and I actually don't know. I mean, you've got biographies, I suppose, of well-known women agent provocateurs or Mata Haris and people like that, I suppose. But I can't think of.
Are we talking about women writing books? On earth? What on earth? I was actually an hour ago. I was going to suggest, is that possibly one of the appeals of this subgenre? Is that there are no women at all? I was actually going to wonder about that, if maybe that applies to the airport crowd.
Well, there's the men's adventure books that at least no woman comes forward and say they're the author. Who knows? Who knows?
I don't think any woman. I've got it's the lady from Lust, but it's very clearly written by a man for men. So
I have a book in my Kindle, The Cherry Delight by something. I'm going to try to get to it this month, but maybe. Do you know what I'm talking about? Cherry Delight?
I've never read anything by it.
That's the character's name. She's a female espionage agent who, I think, much like that one, services lots of other agents.
Must be written by a man though, when it's got all this fantasy stuff in there.
Although, Mark, your story about Franz Joseph reminds me of a time when one of the times that I was in Prague. I was in a room full of people. We were all drinking. We were all talking. We were all laughing, having a wonderful time. And at one point, in a conversation I was having with a few people, I just offhandedly mentioned, I don't know, some of the things I've seen today, you'd think the Habsburgs were still in charge. And I swear to God, the whole room went silent. It was like I had insulted their grandmothers. It was like suddenly there was a personal insult in the room. Heads snapped around. You're still under Habsburg rule over there.
It's kind of interesting though, because there is mixed feelings about the Habsburgs. There are some people here who actually think the whole last 100 years should just be consigned to history, and we should be, kind of united with Austria again and basically have them back.
Isn't there Habsburg claimant?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, actually, in one of our classrooms, we do have as a joke at the back of the classroom the original portrait of Franz Joseph, which would have hung in the classroom back in the day, which I'm assuming is probably the same portrait that is in the beginning of the book Good Soldier Schweik by Hašek, which has the fly on it and stuff. I'm guessing it's the same portrait because they probably issued them around. So,
but poor Franz Ferdinand, the nephew, the heir apparent, driving in his car there He takes a wrong turn. The car stalls at the curb, and that gave Micah Cummins the opportunity he needed
Unbelievable.
to pull the trigger.
That Micah Cummins going around shooting poor old Erskine Childers. Well, first Franz Ferdinand, then Erskine Childers. It's like,
always the sweet-faced ones. They're always the ones you have to watch out for.
it's outrageous, isn't it? It's outrageous. Apparently, Spaminator Googled Gary Powers and wasn't prepared for that rabbit hole.
No,
Aaron doesn't know who it is either. Apparently, some women here for you, Heather. I'm guessing they're authors. Rosalie Neck, Kate Atkinson, and Kate Quick. Well, the thing is, it's a good point. I struggle to think of one.
the classic moment from Monty Python's The Life of Brian. Are there any women here today?
No.
No. But that is a point. I mean, it's like men writing romance novels. I know there's probably some men who do write romance novels, but are they on the cover as men writing romance novels? Or they all give themselves a pseudonym?
Yes, Tim. I knew one. Yes, Stella Rimington's been writing some recently.
You aren't seriously going to claim that the name Stella Rimington is real. You aren't seriously going to say that, are you? I mean, honestly.
Well, I don't know if her name's real, but that was certainly the name she used when she was M.
Well, I guarantee you that if any of Greg's neighbors ever recruit me into the intelligence services, I'm going to use the name Stella Rimington. I couldn't come up with anything better than that. That's hilarious.
Was she MI5 or was she? Oh, yeah, I suppose, yeah. Heather saying perhaps she stumbled upon a gap in the market for a woman writing about the spy world. There might be time to change the plot of my NaNoWriMo novel. It was going to be a humorous novel, but, well, it could still be humorous.
Yes, you could name the character Cherry Delight or Lady from Lust or...
Plus, it's pretty funny, isn't it, to write a book in which a woman keeps a secret? Am I right? Up top. I'm trying to get Mark canceled here.
I know you could do all this on my channel, right? Yeah, we've already had Trump and Putin and all that stuff.
Am I right?
Look over my shoulder. Yeah. But that is actually, I think, but it is kind of a good point, though, because like many other types of books or genres or whatever, we can think of female authors. I mean, obviously, you get female mystery writers and whatever else, but this seems to be an area where there is a dearth.
Right. And since that's true, that leads me to wonder if maybe that's part of the reason of the appeal. Usually when you see an exclusion like that, a total exclusion like that, that isn't accidental. I wonder if this hasn't always been a subgenre that has been a lot fueled by a kind of man cave mentality. I mean, it isn't just that the men write these books and the men are all the stars of these books. It's the way women are treated in the books.
It's true. I mean, even look at Le Carré, really. When you look at the likes of Mrs. Smiley, Lady Anne, of course, she's a bit of a one, isn't she?
In our group read book, The Spy Who Came In From the Coast, the two characters are they're abominable creatures. They're either stupid or incredibly blockheadedly evil.
And then you've got Connie Sachs, who is like kind of obviously a hero in the book, but she is so bizarrely eccentric and whatever. Yeah, it's interesting. Very interesting. I haven't really thought of that. So BroTube turns to SpyTube.
When you talk about that, there's a new book I saw reviewed in the Washington Post. Jean Le Carré's biographers come out with like a code to the book about I guess in real life Jean Le Carré was a bit of a misogynist, and going a bit is being polite. I think he was full bore misogynist in real life, at least according to the review. So
yeah, a misogynist and a lech. Not just a misogynist, but someone who according to this, I think is just obvious slander. and obvious, bragging on his part, whatever part of it that is. I don't think there's any truth to it. But not just a misogynist, but someone who was eager to sleep with the wives of colleagues and friends. I don't believe.
Have you read that book or just read the reviews of it?
I just read the reviews.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't. It strikes me as just. I want women to come forward and confirm it, and none have. So I want to believe. I want to hear it from women first. It sounds to me exactly like the kind of thing that ex-agents or ex-agent wannabes men would say at their clubs, and it would grow in the telling.
In other words, it's unverified stories.
Yeah, I have not seen any verification that I trust.
Okay. I just said it came out and said, "Whoa, I wonder if that'd be good for Dr. No-vember." It's sort of related to spy, or at least espionage fiction. So
he was anti-Brexit, so he's good in my books anyway. Let's put it that way.
Mark, was there anyone with a college education who was for Brexit?
Yes, there were, but it was probably for their own benefits, at least.
It's like having a college education and voting for Trump, but
the people like Johnson himself is university educated.
And one other name you could come up with, who you are certainly doomed to have as a prime minister, sometime real soon. Yeah, but there you wonder if there wasn't something else going on.
You've scared me now. Who on earth are we doomed to have next?
Think about the worst possible scenario. He also has a list of degrees a mile long.
I can't think. I'm only thinking Rees-Mogg and Gove and who the heck?
But you don't have to worry about it anyway, right? You're not going back to old Blighty.
Well, no, but it's not. They're not going to win the next election. The Tories, I don't think. No. Now I can't believe you haven't read any Robert Harris, Ryan. You could read. It doesn't fit with this theme. Well, it fits with the theme, I guess, but not with the era. You could read An Officer and a Spy, is it, or A Gentleman and a Spy, which is about the Dreyfus affair. That was a really good novel. I enjoyed that. Enigma, I suppose, fits partly as well because it's
probably the closest. It's probably the closest to what he did.
Now he also wrote Fatherland.
He did.
Yeah.
And he's done something in Rome as well.
Yeah,
he did. Yeah, whole series.
3 books on Rome and 1 on Pompeii as well, I think. Well, 3 Cicero and 1 Pompeii.
Yeah, the Pompeii book is terrific. He's well worth reading. Well worth reading. In fact, I would say start with the Pompeii book. But I'm a little bit biased.
I started with Fatherland, and then I think Enigma came out.
I think everybody started with.
Yeah, I think I started in the order pretty much.
And I remember really liking Fatherland, and there was a big secret that they're covering up, and then you got to the secret they're covering up, and go, "Oh, come on. Okay, Steve's gonna he could have tried a little harder."
Yeah.
Is that Fatherland, or are you thinking Archangel? Because I remember thinking the reveal in Archangel, was it Archangel? Yeah, was a
Archangel has a lame reveal, but Fatherland definitely is what Greg's thinking of. It's where you get everybody playing elaborate, solemn footsie with this big reveal MacGuffin. Then when you get to it, you think, oh, come on, I've seen that 30 times. That is not a big reveal MacGuffin at all.
No, just read history.
Yeah, but not that it matters, because Harris is so good that even if a book on Pompeii has the biggest reveal MacGuffin of them all, it still works. So I don't want to spoil things for Mark.
Well, there's a volcano. What?
You have a long look on your face.
No. I was just thinking because I really actually enjoyed, which is strange because not much happens in it, but it was really readable to me. Was Conclave. I enjoyed that about electing the Pope. It was good. And then I've got the newest one. Well, no, there's one called The Second Sleep, which got really badly reviewed, and I didn't read it for that reason, which I normally don't do. But I just, because I have to be careful now what I buy, save money. But I did buy Act of Oblivion, which I'm looking forward to getting to. That's supposed to be quite good. So
yeah, when Greg says just read history, Robert Harris's book Munich, you could just
brilliant, yeah.
History of Munich, you could just do it. He adds no drama to it at all. That was
a bad one. Munich?
It was good, but it was a nightmare to review because the whole time in my review, I just wanted to say, there are lots of good histories of the tension at Munich. If a novelist is not adding any novelist stuff, then why not just read one of the great histories? I got the impression the book's not very long, but I got the impression all throughout it that Harris would have liked to write a straight up history and just couldn't do it.
I don't know. I kind of enjoyed it. I think the thing is, it's the escapism of it. I don't. The way he writes it, it's just it's very easy to read, and
very little patience for people who need their nonfiction pill wrapped in sugar. Very little patience for that. There are really good histories of Munich.
Yeah, for sure. But I just like to read anything because it's kind of related to me again where I am here, right? You see, people still remember Munich because it was the death nail of and it's and I live where I don't live. This is the weird thing when people talk about Sudetenland. Is like I don't live in Sudetenland, but 2 kilometers up the road is the Sudetenland, and where I'm moving to, the village I'll be moving to in the future was the Sudetenland as well. But here it's not. But all across the Sudetenland are all these bunkers and things, right? They built and constructed, which of course ended up being worthless. And it's a big what if for me in history is what would have happened, because the Czech army was really good. They probably could have, to some degree, held up their own. They wouldn't have been such a walkover if they'd got their bunker system finished and the army was extremely well supplied. It was also, of course, a democracy. All these things. It's interesting to see how they would have held up against the Germans had they been put to the test. But of course, they were betrayed, which they do remind me from time to time. It's very awkward because we have I have this war memorial literally next door to where I live. Yeah, I live on Namiesti Republiki, which is like the square of the Republic, and there's this war memorial there, and I think it's because last week was the anniversary of the foundation of Czechoslovakia, and they have a ceremony, and they also do one at the end of the war, and I can't remember which one they do, but they always regale the story of France and Britain betraying Czechoslovakia at Munich. And, the number of times I've stood out there and just kind of just been like, oh, dear, oh dear, I want to just disappear. Even though...
Nevertheless, Stockholm syndrome is seeping in around the edges for you. You can't avoid it. I can't think of any other reason than Stockholm syndrome why you would wonder how the Czech army would have fared against the Wehrmacht. It's only because you're in there. It's only because you're living there.
No, I disagree, Steve, in that respect.
They'd have been crushed like cardboard.
No, I don't think so. Not on home turf. Because what you have to remember is a big percentage of armored vehicles that went to the invasion of France came from Czechoslovakia. I think if they would have started the war in 37, 38, not in 39, and I think that also would have been a different. It would totally not have been a Polish situation. I don't know. I don't think so. And I think the Czechs had a plan.
If you were living in Poland and building a house in Poland, you might have a different take.
Well, it's only 10 kilometers up the road here, but. I think
that whole area that you're in is just the size of a postage stamp.
Yeah. But what's really nice about it is because, and it sticks on with the topic, is like everybody had these views of Eastern Europe, and Le Carré doesn't do much for the Czech tourist trade in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. And especially if you do watch the series, Greg, the bit they film in Czechoslovakia is like it's grey, it's raining, it's got these concrete buildings, it's horrible, and it's all set in the second city of Brno. And as I said, my father's a big fan of these things and the series, and we went to Brno, and it's a beautiful, beautiful city. completely nothing like it's depicted. So it's hard done. But I'll just go through the last comments, and then I guess we can probably wrap it up.
I was going to say Frida is insisting on wanting to go to go outside. Otherwise, I could do this forever.
Just go through off topic. Does anyone know how to find out about someone's in Eastern Europe? I will get back to you on that, Yanni. I can probably give you some information. Heather, you should probably change your project anyway, as I'm sure Steve will agree. Girls can't be humorous. Am I right, fellas? No spoilers. Thank you so much. Never need a reason to read espionage, but we'll take it. Yanni hopes the Tories don't win the next election. I don't think they will, thankfully. All these book recommendations. I already have 10 years of unread books on my shelves. Well, I know. And Yanni, are you going to have a Patreon party live get together online? Yes, I will one day, for sure. I'm still quite new to it, but I will work out how I can do that. But I think our dear viewers, we'll stop here, and we shall be back sometime next week, hopefully. Maybe with the same guests plus extra, maybe some different ones who are not here. We'll see how it works out with people's schedules. But thank you ever so much, everybody, for joining.
Week before Thanksgiving.
Week before Thanksgiving will be the live show about The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. So read it before then if you want to avoid any spoilers. There's no excuse for any of you not to read it if you haven't read it, because it's extremely short. You can read it over the course of a weekend.
And seminal. It's an important book in the subject.
It is absolutely brilliantly done. It really is. So I shall end the stream, and then that's it. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. Do take care, and we will see you.
Everyone came by.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Oh.